Welcome all. This is Srimai Majumdar from Swami Vivekananda Institute of Modern Science. Today I shall take up the chapter of listening. It is an important question why communication should give importance to listening and how is listening attached to communication. First of all, let us differentiate between the two words listening and hearing. Why should we focus on listening when we already hear things? The basic difference has to be understood. Hearing is a physical activity. Always remember that hearing is a physical activity and this activity will not affect the cognitive part. Supposing a fan is whirring above our heads and we can hear, but it is not registering in our minds. Here comes the difference between listening and hearing. When we are concentrating on that sound, we are trying to focus on the meaning of the sound or the source of that sound, then it becomes listening and it is no longer hearing. It transcends from hearing to listening. Therefore, hearing is a passive activity while listening is very much an active action. We say that listening is cognitive because there is much intellectual activity. Our heads, our brain is very much focused on the source, on the meaning of this particular sound. So it is cognitive. We try to recognize what is it. Therefore, it is also intellectual. Our brain is involved in understanding the meaning, in decoding the meaning of that particular sound. It can be music, it can be words, it can be anything else. And once we get the sound inside our heads and decode it, obviously there will be a feedback. It is response oriented. After we have understood the difference between listening and hearing, we must analyze how many types of listening do we have. People will be surprised that there are types of listening. We take it for granted that when we listen, we automatically receive sounds, we sort of understand, we sort of inherit this process automatically. It's a physical, intellectual activity, but there are divisions. The first one is pretending listening. This is very, very obvious. Sometimes in the classroom, we can, as students, and we can see students who pretend to listen as if they are very engrossed in the listening part. Actually, it is only a mask. They are wearing a mask and they are pretending to listen. In the next group, we find listening can be selective. When listening is selective, when we choose the desired part to listen, we choose a particular part in which we are interested and we listen to that part, and that is a selective listening. In a class lecture, many a times we are not interested in the introduction or the elaborate examples, but when it comes to the crunch of the material, then we are selecting to listen to that part of the talk. Sometimes listening is superficial. What do we mean by superficial? We listen only to the words. We do not go into the deeper meaning of the words, and it does not really register. That kind of listening is superficial listening. The next one is attentive listening. There is a close bonding between attentive listening and superficial listening. Sometimes we really pay attention, but we do not understand the true meaning of that particular those particular words or that particular item. I can give you an example of listening to a song in a foreign language. We may listen to the music, but we will not understand the meaning of that particular song. We next come to emphatic listening. Emphatic listening involves not only the ears, not only the act of absorbing the sound, it actually means to listen to the words intensely, to listen to the sound intensely, and understand it deeply, spiritually, emotionally, as well as intellectually. Emphatic listening is one of the highest point of listening, where we take the words, we take the sounds, analyze it, register it, and keep it stored with emotional, intellectual attachment. The next type of listening is dynamic listening, or we can call it a creative listening. Here, the listener creates an atmosphere, a synergistic atmosphere between the as a receiver and as a receiver, he creates this synergy, this atmosphere of give and take between the speaker and the receiver. This can be done through encouraging the speaker to talk to him, to react through reactions, through facial expressions. We create a dynamic surrounding where listening comes into full force. And last is intuitive listening. Sometimes listening goes deeper than what we actually listen, what we actually hear. I will give you my favorite example in this case, that when a mother hears the cry of the baby, she immediately, intuitively understands whether the baby is crying because of its hunger, because of the hunger pain, or is it because the baby is in pain? Here is an example of intuitive listening. Once we have understood the types of listening, let's analyze the physical activity or the physical steps that we undergo in the process of listening. We know very well that listening is a physical activity. The first ladder, the first step is sensing. Our sense organs, ears, they become active when they receive a sound. After the sensing part is over, when we physically receive a sound, automatically we go into interpreting. What is the meaning of interpretation? It means to understand. The first step of receiving a sound is now converted into understanding or receiving it with a meaning. Is it the sound of a thunder, the cloud, or is it the sound of a music? Is it a human sound of joy, pain, or is it a sound of words? We start interpreting. Once this activity of interpretation is over, we evaluate. Evaluate is associated with valuation, judgment. We try to give weightage to the sound, the words. After we judge the value or the actual meaning of the word or the sound, we try to remember. Why? Because memory is a storehouse of attaching sound into words, into meanings. There is an automatic connection that once we evaluate the sound, we try to attach a proper meaning from our memory box. We try to connect it with connect it with a particular meaning. And once the meaning or the decoding of that sound is done, we respond to that particular sound. This is where the act of listening comes full circle. We first hear. From the physical activity, we go into the intellectual activity, and the end of this intellectual activity culminates into response. We shall continue with our discussion on listening in the next part of our discourse on communication and the association of communication with listening. Thank you for being with us. We shall see you again. Thanks a lot.